RumbleStump.
You're listening to 1232, an audio epic, produced by RumbleStump Entertainment. Hello, 1232 listeners. This is Callie Sioux, and I'm excited to tell you about Dramify, the ultimate platform for creators and fans of audio dramas. With oodles of genres, hundreds of shows, and thousands of episodes, Dramify is your go-to streaming service exclusively for family-friendly audio dramas. Whether you're a devoted listener or a creator of a family-friendly masterpiece, Dramify has something for you. And guess what, 1232 listeners? You can now enjoy 1232 on Dramify. Just go to dramify.com/1232. That's DRAMAFY.com/1232 and get started for free. Happy listening.
This episode of 1232 is sponsored in part by Oasis Family Media and its family of companies including Oasis Audio, Enclave Publishing, and Sky Turtle Press. Publishers of the forthcoming epic Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen, rendered in modern prose by Rebecca K. Reynolds and illustrated by Justin Gerard. For more information, visit fairyqueen.com. That's fairyqueen.com, or find the link in the description below.
Chapter 21. Later in the evening, Cardigan and his two lieutenants, Ed and Smyth, sat around a fire with Priest Michael, disheartened by their small numbers and few weapons. That day, only 15 men from Brecon joined, which put the total of fighting men at 130, most of them able archers. With the horses and armor they'd gained from ambushing Rhaegar's men, they had a light cavalry of 30 horses. From the observations of the new recruits, Rhaegar had a force of nearly 300 men at arms. However, many native archers had been press-ganged into the enchantress's service. Meeting them head-on would be impossible. Ed reminded them of the spy he and Rona had discovered, and how much Zorreale now knew of their whereabouts. Smyth and the priest were in favor of defending their current position in the forest and hills surrounding. But Ed favored moving north, at least before winter. None of them entertained the hope of getting help from the other kingdoms. Who would come to the aid of a bunch of peasants resisting such powerful enemies? Cardigan opposed going north. The people of Brecon and her countryside were in terror even now. Therefore, since the pitched battle was impossible, he suggested laying siege to the fortress. He knew the underground tunnels well enough, and had seen John Thatcher's sketches of the old keep, but the others were against it, believing it would be even worse for the people imprisoned within the walls.
I acknowledge this, friends, but I am firm on it. We must be on the offensive, not the other way around. And we have a duty to protect the citizens of Brecon. More will come as winter comes on. There will be no food except that Zorreale rations from a stronghold. We must act without delay before the first snow and take the fortress.
Cardigan said, standing up as he spoke. The others respected his resolve, but to them, it still looked impossible. They all sat on stumps around a heap of glowing coals. The priest stirred them with a staff, and flames danced in one corner or another of the coal bed. When one flickering flame died, another popped up somewhere else, until, finally, the coals were all aflame again. Cardigan fetched more wood from nearby, causing sparks to scatter in the air as he threw a fresh log on the coals. The fire now cackled happily. Smyth, who had been mostly pensive this whole time, got an idea.
There is our answer.
He pointed to the fire. They didn't know what he meant, and urged him to explain.
You saw how one flame appeared, then vanished as another appeared in a different place. See how the fire danced over the coals in this manner, until they were all ablaze once more. This is how we can drive the enchantress out. We appear, we do her harm, but vanish only to appear again elsewhere. Do you see? Do you see how we can weary her until she goes mad?
It was a revelation. They spent the hours of the night and some of the early morning forging their new strategy. The next day, they classified their troops in divisions under Ed, Smyth, Priest Michael, and Cardigan. Cardigan was in charge of horse and mounted raids. The priest, defensive fortifications about the camp. Smyth was to concentrate his efforts with the priest in training and commanding knifemen. Though some had swords, it was better to leave the heavier artillery to the horsemen. Smyth's knifemen would join combat with long hunting knives, or woodsmen's axes, or pikes, or javelins. Ed took command of every able citizen, man, woman, or child who could draw a bow. His companies of archers, they hoped, would prove the most effective in every engagement. The first order of business was to conceal their main camp and to construct a line of communication in several directions. Flint proved especially useful in this, since he tinkered around and built a sort of telegraph line between hidden watchtowers, tall trees, actually, with a rawhide string. This took 3 days of his valuable time. Meanwhile, Rona kept a sharp eye on his pet. To Rona, the dog had too much freedom, but Flint had been instructed to keep it on a rope. She had tried to pick up some of her old workout routine in order to stay alert. Her ribs slowly healed, and Rona knew she had to push through the pain. Along with their assigned duties, the siblings spent time under Ed's tutelage in order to use a bow effectively. Each division, under its leader, spent part of the day practicing their specific skill. It was not unusual throughout the day to see a dozen men drilling in the meadow. Before the smoke of the barley fields had settled, the resistance had already struck at the enchantress on 4 simultaneous missions. One group, with Cardigan, rode into the open beyond the castle and into the trees, provoking Rhaegar to send out a dozen riders in pursuit, who, to his great ire, never returned. Some of the younger boys with Smyth set fire to the bridge between the town and the castle, which also made it impossible to transport the rock from the quarry to the keep. Another bunch, mostly women, carried out a cartload of seed from Zorreale's stores, being nearly caught, but escaping in the confusion caused by the burning bridge. The other group were 3 Brecon craftsmen who had volunteered, each with a valuable trade. That day, and every day after, they worked on the castle or on the new bridge in the latter part of the day, and undid a vast amount of the work by miscutting the stones or doing other damage to some part of the foundation to slow progress. Another advantage was the new intel they could bring in each evening. But the sorceress was not forbearing, and within the week, she retaliated. The people she kept in the walls were the families of the men who worked either felling timber, or in the quarry, or in the castle itself. Their families were let out during the day to work, and she fed them from the storehouse once a day. But following the attack on the bridge, she turned all the women out of the castle, chained them in at night, and kept the children locked up. The priest had gathered several of the women to camp, over 50 of them, and Rhaegar rode in their wake, but was thwarted thanks to the warning sent by telegraph. This encounter taught him how much more organized the resistance had become. Rona mentioned to Cardigan and Ed that they were sitting on a ticking time bomb, which confounded them and made Rona furious trying to explain. It had been 2 weeks since Rona and Flint's close call on the ledge during what was remembered as the battle before the war. They both had grown used to handling bows, however crudely, and they both rode horses 100% better. They were also part of the daily hunting parties that went out after game for the growing camp. Feeding everyone was a task that took some doing. Flint had been busy tinkering with the telegraph or hanging out with the girls in the camp. The hound had not left his side for 2 weeks. Her demeanor seemed very subdued, which Rona thought was because of captivity. The enemy was not quiet, however. All the livestock, for 6 leagues around, had been driven off or slaughtered, the houses looted, and the barns burned. Any horse found without Zorreale's brand was hamstrung. Anyone coming down the forest road was arrested. Rumors crept around the country that there would be a battle soon that would decide it all. And Brecknockshire became a topic in the halls of other keeps, watching, listening for what was to come.
You've been listening to episode 20 of 1232, produced by RumbleStump Entertainment. Written by Callie, Sioux, and Cheyenne Belle. Narrated by Callie, Sioux. Today's voice talents include Mike Darling as Smyth, Matt Burke as Cardigan. This episode was mixed and engineered by Jhett Black, with editing and sound design by Caballero, Caballero Sounds. Music by Callie, Sioux, and Jhett Black. Mastered by Zach Bryant, 9 Moon Mastering, with cover art by Niall C. Grant. This episode was made possible by our generous and incredible supporters through Kickstarter and our Patreon members. You know who you are. To our knights, our bards, our Welsh Bowmen, wizards, and chieftains, thank you. Continue the adventure in episode 21.